Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive into the world of medical myths. Buckle up and get ready to have some of your most cherished beliefs challenged, because today we're diving deep, separating fact from fiction. And to help us do that, we have a very special guest, expert speaker.
You got it. And our guide for this journey is the one and only Professor Whiskers.
Yes, Professor Whiskers.
Yeah.
You know him right. He's the cat professor who uses his unique feline perspective to debunk some of the most common medical myths out there.
It's a truly delightful and informative experience.
Delightful is right. And Professor Whiskers doesn't hold back. He takes on those myths head on, starting with the classic saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Now, we've all heard it. But is there any truth to it? Does an apple a day really have magical powers?
Well, I think we can all agree that apples are good for you, but Professor Whiskers sets the record straight with a perfect analogy. He compares eating an apple a day to a cat licking its fur. It's a healthy habit for sure, but it won't replace a trip to the vet when you're really sick.
Right, just like a balanced diet is important for us humans. It's not a guaranteed shield against all illnesses.
Yeah, agree.
So apples, good, but not a cure-all.
Got it.
Got it. Moving on to another myth that Professor Whiskers tackles. You need 8 glasses of water a day. We've all heard this countless times, but is it really the magic number for everyone?
Professor Whiskers would say, hold on a whisker. Hydration needs are as individual as cats themselves. Your body size, activity level, even the climate you live in, all these factors play a role. It's like comparing a cat lounging in a sunbeam. They're going to need more water than one snoozing in a cool, shady spot.
So true.
Yeah.
It's all about listening to your body and what it needs. Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, ready for a myth that might make you squirm a little bit. This one's about food, and those of us who maybe have a little bit of a relaxed relationship with the 5-second rule.
Oh, the 5-second rule. If I pick it up fast enough, it's still good.
Great,
Yeah.
exactly. But does it actually hold up?
Well, Professor Whiskers, being a cat who's probably sampled his fair share of floor snacks, debunks this one pretty swiftly. He uses the image of a cat's quick paw snatching food to illustrate just how fast bacteria can contaminate things. And it happens instantly.
But no more wishful thinking with the 5-second rule. Germs don't care about our made-up time limits. All right, now let's tackle a myth that's always bugged me. We only use 10% of our brains. I mean, are we really only tapping into a fraction of our potential?
Professor Whiskers uses a brilliant analogy to debunk this one. He compares it to a cat seemingly just relaxing in a sunbeam. They may look relaxed, but trust me, their senses are alert and their brains are processing tons of information.
So just like those sunbathing cats, we're using way more of our brains than we might think.
Precisely.
Okay, good to know we're not as mentally lazy as we thought. Now, for a myth I'm sure many of us can relate to, especially as we get a little older, pulling out a gray hair causes more to grow. Have you ever been tempted to pluck those pesky silver strands?
Oh, I think we've all been there. But Professor Whiskers would caution against overplucking. He actually compares it to trimming a cat's whiskers, which is a definite no-no. While plucking one gray hair won't magically cause more to sprout up, it can damage the hair follicle, which could lead to thinner hair over time.
So maybe resisting the urge to pluck is a good idea.
Probably wise.
All right, speaking of hair, another common belief is that shaving makes hair grow back thicker and darker. Is there any truth to this?
Professor Whiskers revisits those all-important whiskers to explain this one. He says that shaving simply changes the texture of the hair as it grows back. It doesn't actually affect the thickness or the color, so that stubbly feeling you get, it's just an illusion.
It's all about how the hair is cut.
Got it. This next one might hit home for all the bookworms out there. Reading in dim light ruins your eyes. I'll admit, I've definitely been guilty of this one. Don't worry, Professor Whiskers assures us that reading in low light might cause some temporary eye strain, but it won't do any lasting damage. He compares it to a cat gazing at birds outside. It might tire their eyes a bit, but it won't cause permanent harm.
That's good to hear. As long as I make sure to have good lighting most of the time, my reading habits are safe. All right, on to a myth that often pops up as we age. People shrink as they get older. It's true, we might not be as tall as we once were, but is it actual shrinkage?
Professor Whiskers explains that height loss in humans is mostly due to changes in the spine as we age, not because our bones are shrinking. It's similar to how older cats might not be able to jump as high as they used to.
So it's a natural part of getting older, just like with our feline friends.
Exactly.
Okay, on to a myth that might make some of you cringe. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis.
So is that popping sound really a sign of future joint problems? Professor Whiskers sets the record straight with a very human-centric analogy. He compares kneading a blanket to cracking your knuckles. Neither one will ruin a sweater, even if some people find it annoying. He explains that those pops are simply gas bubbles being released in your joints, not a sign of arthritis.
Phew. So crack away without fear, knuckle crackers.
Exactly.
Next up, a myth that often gets unfairly blamed on our younger generation. Eating sugar makes kids hyper. Is it really the sugar rush that sends them bouncing off the walls?
Professor Whiskers wisely points out that it's not the sugar itself that's the culprit. It's more likely the excitement, the atmosphere, or in the case of cats, maybe a lively game of chase the laser pointer.
Makes sense. It's the context, not just the sugar. Right. Moving on to a myth that might make you rethink your oral hygiene routine. Toothbrushes are germ factories. Are the things we use to clean our teeth actually covered in bacteria?
Professor Whiskers acknowledges that toothbrushes can harbor bacteria, but he doesn't want us to panic. He emphasizes the importance of proper care, rinsing your toothbrush well and replacing it regularly. And of course, he throws in a classic Professor Whiskers quip, "Don't use your toothbrush to groom your whiskers."
Solid advice. All right, last but not least, let's tackle a myth that often surrounds pregnancy. Pregnant women should avoid baths. Are warm baths really off limits during those 9 months?
Professor Whiskers assures us that warm baths are perfectly safe during pregnancy as long as the water isn't too hot. He compares it to a cat basking in a sunbeam. It's all about staying cozy and relaxed without getting overheated.
Such a great analogy. And you know what else is great?
What's that?
Professor Whiskers' use of humor. It makes learning about these sometimes complex topics fun and engaging.
Absolutely. He's a master at making science accessible to everyone. And you know what else I love about him?
What's that?
He's not afraid to challenge our assumptions and make us think critically about the things we believe.
So true. Professor Whiskers, you've inspired us to be more informed and more engaged in our own health journey.
Hear, hear. Welcome back to our deep dive into medical myths with the one and only Professor Whiskers.
You know, I'm still thinking about that mysterious blah sound at the end of his lecture. It's like he had this one last bit of wisdom to share, but the technology just couldn't quite handle it. Or maybe he was just messing with us,
Yeah.
leaving us with a little chuckle.
It certainly sparked a lot of curiosity among viewers. But even without that final blah, Professor Whiskers gave us so much to think about. It makes you wonder why these medical myths, even the ones that seem so outlandish, manage to stick around for so long.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
That's a good question. I think part of it might be that they offer these really simple explanations for things that are actually pretty complex. It's just easier to believe in a quick fix or a single cause than to really grapple with all the nuances of health and biology.
That makes sense. I mean, look at the myth about an apple a day, keeping
Yeah.
the doctor away. It's catchy, right?
Yeah.
And it promotes healthy eating, but it definitely oversimplifies all the things that actually contribute to good health.
Right. It's so much more comforting to believe that there's this one simple solution than to think about all the potential health challenges that we might face.
And, sometimes I think these myths get passed down through generations, almost like family traditions. My grandma always swore that you had to wait an hour after eating before swimming.
Ah, yeah, that's a classic. I wonder where that one came from.
I think it's something about digestion, diverting blood flow away from your muscles, which would make swimming more difficult and maybe even dangerous.
But in reality, there's no real evidence to back that up. A light meal before swimming is totally fine.
It's funny how those old wives' tales can be so hard to shake, even when we know better.
I think another reason these myths persist is confirmation bias. That tendency we have to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs, even if those beliefs are inaccurate.
Oh, so if someone already believes that cracking their knuckles causes arthritis, they might be more likely to notice when someone who cracks their knuckles develops joint pain, but they might completely overlook all the people who crack their knuckles and have perfectly healthy joints.
Exactly. It's a way of filtering information to fit our preconceived notions. And let's not forget the role of marketing and advertising in all of this. Companies often exploit these myths to sell products promising miracle cures or quick fixes that just don't exist.
Like all those detox teas that claim to cleanse your body of toxins.
Right. As if our bodies don't have perfectly good detoxification systems already in the form of our liver and kidneys.
It's a good reminder to be critical consumers and not fall for those marketing tactics that try to play on our fears and insecurities.
Definitely. But, it's not always about some malicious intent or making a profit. Sometimes I think these myths stick around just because they offer a sense of comfort or control.
I can see that, for instance, the myth that we only use 10% of our brains.
Yeah.
It's kind of appealing to think that we have all this untapped potential just waiting to be unlocked.
Exactly. It's much more exciting to believe that than to accept that our brains are already working at full capacity, even if we're not always aware of everything that's going on up there.
It's kind of like Professor Whiskers, seemingly napping in that sunbeam.
No.
We might assume he's just relaxing, but his brain is actually busy processing information and responding to his surroundings.
The perfect analogy. It highlights the fact that even when we're not consciously engaged in something, our brains are still working hard to keep us functioning.
Speaking of brains, it's pretty amazing how some of these medical myths have managed to survive, even as our understanding of science and medicine has advanced so much.
It really shows just how powerful beliefs can be, even in the face of contradictory evidence. And it also speaks to the importance of scientific literacy and critical thinking skills.
We need to be able to evaluate information, to be able to separate fact from fiction and make informed decisions about our health and well-being.
Absolutely. And that's where resources like Professor Whiskers' lecture can be so valuable. He presents this sometimes complex information in a way that's engaging and accessible, helping us to really understand the science behind these myths.
I completely agree. He's a true champion of science communication, even with that little blah at the end.
Indeed. It's almost as if he's reminding us that learning is an ongoing journey, full of surprises and unexpected turns, and that even the most knowledgeable experts, feline or human, are still prone to the occasional hiccup.
That's a great perspective. It reminds us to stay curious, to keep asking questions, and to always be open to new information, even if it comes with a slightly strange sound effect.
Well said. And I think that's a perfect lead into our next topic, the role of technology in both spreading and debunking these medical myths.
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, we live in a time where we have access to so much information, both accurate and inaccurate, right at our fingertips. So how do we navigate all of that and make sure that we're getting reliable information?
That's a question we'll tackle right after this.
And we're back, folks, ready to continue our deep dive with Professor Whiskers. As we were discussing the reasons why these medical myths stick around, it really got me thinking about technology and the role it plays in both spreading and debunking those myths.
Yeah, it's a real double-edged sword, isn't it? On one hand, we have more access to information than ever before thanks to the internet and social media, but that also means there's more potential for misinformation to spread like wildfire.
Totally. It's like we have this incredible tool for finding evidence-based research and fact-checking claims. But we also have to be so careful about the misleading articles and biased opinions that we might come across.
And those clickbaity headlines don't help. It's easy to get caught up in the drama and share something without even checking if it's true.
Oh, definitely. That's why it's so important to be a critical thinker, especially when it comes to online information.
Right. We can't just passively accept everything we see online. We need to be active participants, questioning what we read and checking sources.
Like being a good detective, gathering evidence, weighing different perspectives, and making our own conclusions based on the facts.
I like that analogy. And just like a good detective, we have to be aware of our own biases and the biases of the sources we're looking at.
Absolutely. So recognizing those biases and thinking critically is key. But how do we get more people to do that?
I think education is a big part of it. We need to start teaching critical thinking skills, media literacy, and scientific literacy from a young age.
That's so true. If we can equip people with the tools to evaluate information and make informed decisions, then they'll be less likely to fall for those myths.
Exactly. It's all about empowering people to become informed citizens.
Yeah.
Like Professor Whiskers questioning those long-held medical beliefs.
He's a great role model for that. And it's also a reminder that even experts can be wrong sometimes. Just look at that blah at the end of his lecture.
It's true. It just goes to show that we're all human, even those with fancy titles and lots of experience. And that's okay. It's how we learn and grow.
And it's a good reminder that technology, while incredibly powerful, isn't perfect either. We need to approach information from all sources, whether it's a scientific journal or an AI-generated lecture, with a critical eye.
Well said.
So as we wrap up our deep dive with Professor Whiskers, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What can they do to navigate this complex world of health information?
I think the most important thing is to be curious. Don't be afraid to question what you hear, even if it comes from a source you trust. Dig deeper, explore different perspectives, and challenge your own assumptions.
And remember, health is complicated. There's rarely a simple solution, so don't fall for those quick fixes or those attention-grabbing headlines.
And finally, let's all try to channel our inner Professor Whiskers. Approach learning with a sense of humor, be open to new ideas, and remember that even in the age of AI, critical thinking is still crucial.
Professor Whiskers, you've inspired us to be more informed, more engaged, maybe even a little more skeptical. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new and that you feel empowered to think critically about the health information you encounter out there in the world.